Come on in.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, I'm Brendan. I'm a alcoholic. I'm various holics. I'm like sort of I have a plethora of different programs that I'm in and have been for quite a few years. And I'm from Ireland, from the west of Ireland. Grew up in we were comfortable at home. Parents, my father was a mathematician. He was a professor in the university. We had a we had a good life, but there was something I was out of kilter with everything. An uncle of mine said, he says, Brendan, you came out running and you never stopped. And, that was just sort of the way it was. And, I went through schools, I went through every school I ever went in. I went through one door and out the back door. I was actually thrown out of all of the schools I was in. I was about, and people were sort of saying, well, Brendan, my grandfather wanted to send me to Australia when I was 12. He knew a priest out there that was running a boarding school. He thought maybe they'd be sort of able to take me, and that they held off on that. By the time I was 15, I'd been thrown out of another school, and I was, my uncle was waiting for me in a railway station. He told me he reckoned that I was on my way up to Dublin, and he was waiting there to sort of give me the money to go to England and just go away and leave my family in peace. And that was just kind of the sort of environment that I was creating. I won't say that I was in. I mean, I was just creating this sort of, I created chaos. I didn't realize, that why I was being chaotic. I didn't realize that also that, I was incapable of sitting still. I mean, just like that was not going to happen. And so from the age of about 5 or 6, I was being thrown out of class on a regular basis to wait for some priest in, the long black sort of robe to come around with a leather belt and hit me on the hands for like sort of, being out there again. And I didn't like getting hit in my hands, but I was kind of like almost competing to be out there. And and that was just it. It was there's a film that was made I saw years ago. It was called Up the Downstairs. And it was a film set in somewhere in Brooklyn or something, and it was a school teacher, and you do not go up the downstairs when the bell goes for people to come out. But I was always going up the downstairs. And I mean, I just thought that people should just accept me as I was. And if they just leave me alone and accept me as it was, I'll be fine. Of course, once I found alcohol and drugs and sex and the whole sort of things, I didn't give a damn what people thought, because I didn't, people's opinion of me didn't matter to me at all. All I had to do was just go out and get one of my various different substances or people or whatever, and I'd be grand. I'd be the finest. And that thing they sort of say, coming up out of the house after the storm and everything's blown down, and you're saying, oh, like, man, anything great, like sort of the wind stopped. I mean, that was me. I mean, I was like, sort of, it didn't matter. It did not matter. It didn't matter to me at all. I mean, as a matter of fact, I was just really wasn't interested. That talk about the Peter Pan syndrome. I was totally with that. I had every intention of not accept, I did was no interest in responsibility. The idea of having a house with a picket fence and like sort of car and two kids, whatever, like none of that sort of stuff was going on. I mean, I had no interest. I had interest in like sort of having a good time. And I was interested in, I wouldn't have minded taking up a trade. As a matter of, I was 17, I was in London because I'd been arrested for, lying on the floor of a supermarket with a bottle of whiskey that I was trying to seal in a jacket that I had stolen and with somebody else's checkbook. And and they took me away, and my father came down, he collected me from that, and he said he was actually quite happy because he thought I'd gone off with a crowd called Campus Crusade, which were some young people that were getting into it, and he didn't want me in a cult. But he did keep me out of prison at that stage. But it was just, it was just, and I was just having, I really wasn't trying to harm anybody. I was just having a good time. And I'm living in a squat in London, and I arrived in London with 12 pence, and I'm living in a squat in London with these people, and it's just life. Yeah. But I decided to go back to university, and I became a lawyer. And I actually became a lawyer because I was sitting in the squat, and somebody came in. He said, "We've got a summons to go to court. Who'll go?" And I said, "I'll go." I was coming down off acid, but I said, "I'll go." So I went to court, and I went in there, and I'm talking to the judge, and I'm talking to this guy, and I came out and I thought, like, you're really not listening to me, are you? You know, and sort of came out of there and sort of went back, and somebody said if you'd written an affidavit on even on a piece of toilet paper, you got an extra month. So I thought like learning the law might be a useful thing to do. And you know, and I liked a good argument. You know, I liked a good argument. So you know, I went off and I became a lawyer, and you know, and I worked, and well, it was kind of I didn't really fit in with the kind of lawyer crowd either. You know, I mean, I just sort of, you know, yeah, I mean, I was just kind of, I was just off on my own. I was having a good time, you know, I was having a good time. You know, I mean, I would smoke some opium and then I'd go down to a lecture and sort of hang out and sort of see what was going on. And like, sort of, you know, I went over to England, like to sort of see a girlfriend, and I didn't come back for 5 or 6 weeks. You know, I was having going away parties in England every couple of days, but I didn't, you know, and I was just out of control, but I was happy. I was happily out of control. And you know, and I mean, it went along, and eventually I got a job. You know, and now I'm a lawyer, and I'm working for a company in England, and I'm, you know, I'm driving around this big car, and I'm driving back and across all the different what do you call it, the bridges on my way home. You know, because I want to see, you know, I can't see the sea, but I need the water. You know, so like I'm driving, you know, and I got a big Volvo, and I reckon, well, they won't stop me in a Volvo because they expect that you got, you know, a Labrador and a pair of Wellington boots in the boot. They don't think that you're coming from an Irish pub and you're completely out of your tree. And that was just, you know, I don't usually talk about, you know, what I did in the drinking, whatever, but it's just, you know, I don't ever know what I'm going to talk about. It's like that was just where I was in the world. And I lost my job, and I had got married, and I married somebody from Peru that I'd known for about 5 weeks. And, you know, so I moved to Peru, you know, so now I'm in Peru, but I've just got into AA because like I've obviously got a problem because I got fired from my job a month after I got into AA. So now I'm in Peru. I'm in Peru and I'm going to AA, but like, you know, like you need something to take the edge off. So I'm doing some of the local produce there. You know, I go to parties, I'm up late at night, you know, they say, geez, the gringo's got a lot of energy. He goes to the bathroom a lot, but he doesn't drink, you know. And I'm like, I'm just, it's all the chaos just keeps going on, but I'm having a good time. And, you know, I'm off into the jungle, and I'm there in the jungle, and I'm playing like the Pogues music, like sitting surrounded by indigenous peoples and like, you know, fellas in army uniforms with like sort of skulls and crossbones. And, you know, it just seemed like the right thing to do, you know? And I'm in all that, and I'm not drinking, and I don't drink for 3.5 years, but I do other substances, and then I'm going to a meeting, and I'm trying to break in to work with indigenous peoples, and I'm at this meeting in Bolivia. I didn't have any of the things that I was taking on the side, and so I picked up a drink, and I never made it back to that meeting. I crawled on the ground under the window the following day to get to the room to get money to go back out again. And they had the police looking for me, and they had all sort of things going on, you know. And it was just, you know, I had been trying to get in to work with that group of people. And I picked up a drink after 3.5 years, and everything went immediately. And within 6 months, like my wife had left me, we had a young child. I was, you know, I was basically homicidal. I was thinking like I was going to have to kill her because she obviously wasn't going to allow me to have my kid because I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict, and I don't know that I could live not seeing my kid. And luckily, she left me for somebody else, and you know, and that was done. And she sent my daughter every weekend, and so now I'm not like using any substances during the week because I'm trying to stay sober when my kid is sorry on the weekend. I'm doing it through the week, you know. I'm sort of like into this, and the chaos continues. And it went on for about another 5 years. And then I met a woman that I like. I had given up the idea of being in love or any of that sort of stuff again. It was just like sort of, you know, sex, yes, but like relationships, no. It just didn't seem to work out. And I met this woman, and I wanted to be with her. And I remember telling a friend of mine, look, I don't want to screw this up. And he said, don't. Are you joking me? I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. Of course I'm going to screw it up. You know, I've been kicked out of every school I'm in, every relationship, and every job. I mean, I've got 100% record, but it's all in that sort of scene. It's not on the other way. So like, I'm not expecting that this is going to last. I'm going to screw it up, and I don't want to yet. And I did, of course. And she helped me to get back into AA. And I got back into AA. And when I came back into AA, I came back into AA, and I realized that just going to a meeting wasn't going to do it. Like just going to a meeting and sitting there and listening to people and talking about the problems and what the system is, it wasn't going to do it. I thought, like, there must be something in this program, you know, like, obviously I'm powerless over alcohol because 3.5 years without picking up a drink, I picked up one and I immediately went over the cliff edge. There was no kind of slip sliding here, like, it was just straight over the cliff edge. And if I did it again, I'd go straight over the cliff edge. I don't believe that slip sliding is, it's just like that car behind Sean's head. I'd be straight over it, foot down on the pedal. Here we go. Yeah. And I knew that that was what would happen if I picked up a drink again. And I knew if I was to take another substances, I would pick up a drink. And I'm going there, and I was actually in a situation, and like there was a couple of women who were in the group, and there was kind of hitting on me, and I was saying, like, that's the last thing I need now as well, is that, like, they say beware of the wolves, and I always say to people, beware of the lambs. You know what I mean? Like, sort of, you can get yourself into just as much difficulty from somebody who wants to sort of get into a relationship. You're like, I was just freaked. And I'm going to 3 meetings a day to get through the day. I mean, 3 meetings a day. It was just, and I didn't know if I'd make it. I really did not know if I'd make it. And, you don't have any social security in Peru, and you don't have a certain thing. I don't know how things worked out because I didn't have a job and I couldn't have held something down anyway, I have enough trouble holding down a job. As a matter of fact, I don't manage to really, even when I'm sober, but like sort of, in this chaotic mind, like sort of trying to stay sober and all the pain I was in, I was just in pain. And I remember that the first time I went to a recovery meeting, when I first got into AA back in England, I started sweating from the palms of my hands. And it was really disgusting, but it was kind of like I was getting well. And somewhere along the way, I started to realize that if I was in pain, it was probably because I was getting well. And so here I am, and I'm going to these meetings. And, the Peruvian meetings were like, I mean, there was no question thing about time. Like the meeting lasted until everybody had finished speaking. And, some people that speak for 20 minutes or whatever, like sort of, quite a lot of people speak for 20 minutes. And people would come in halfway through and other people go out and somebody else would take over the chair. And it was really dysfunctional, but it was just, it's been around for 20 years. And I went there. And as soon as I could, I started, I mean, like, if I was at the meeting and there was nobody stepping up to the plate to sort of chair it, I started to chair it because I was there to save my life. And I rushed through the first 3 steps, like, like powerlessness, yeah, life unmanageable, yep. Have to get a higher power, they will return me to sanity. I hope so. Made a decision to turn my will and life over to higher power. How would I know? I'm a liar. I'm a very good liar. I believe my own lies. What's the point of hanging around here? I need to find something out. And I realized it was the 4th step that I needed to get to. I needed to get here and find out what's going on, and nobody was working the steps. Nobody's working the kind of program where I was. And so I came back to Ireland. Somebody gave me a Hazelden guide, some sort of thing, and I wrote through this thing, and I just got stuck into working the steps. And fast forward, like good bit forward, like, and now I'm 14 years sober. I'm running workshops. I'm doing all sorts of things. I'm getting sort of things. Things have gone on. The woman that I had, that I was in love with, and that I sort of, messed up the relationship with, we had got back together. We had a child together, and then it had sort of broken up again almost immediately. That was about 21 years ago. And apart from a brief stint, 3 years later, where we were together for about 2 months and came to Ireland for my parents' 50th, like that relationship, was gone. And I had got into another program, and I was working the steps in another program. I thought if I work all the steps, and it was it was an S program, I thought if I work all the steps here, I'll get clear of all my defects of character. I'll be back with her. Everything will be perfect and I'll be fine. Yeah? So that's like 17 years ago. And it didn't happen. And I'm now I'm living in Japan. And I'm living in Japan, and we have had a child, and I thought she was going to come to Japan with me, and then everything sort of went shit-shaped. And so now I'm in Japan, and I'm on my own out there in Japan, and I'm doing the Joe and Charlie thing again. I'm doing another 4th step, and I'm doing really profoundly, and I'm listening to this thing, and I'm going through this stuff, and I'm ringing up, and I'm hoping just to hear her say that she's happy with our kid. And that's all I'm hoping to hear, is that she'll just say that she's happy with our kid. Because I know this relationship is really, it just seems to be like, it's impossible. But if she just says she was happy with the kid, then I can be okay. And I'll be able to get myself off the hook of feeling, I fucked all this up and I didn't want to, but I did. But like if she was just okay, then maybe I could just be okay. But that's not happening. And so every time I ring up and I'm there, I'm kind of waiting for that, just something, something, something. And I'm waiting for it. And I think she knew what I was waiting for. And she wasn't going to give it to me. You know, as far as she was concerned, like this is really, there is no relationship here. Yeah, we have a kid together, but there's no relationship. And she has no responsibility for me or how I feel or anything like that. And I'm, I'm like, I get visual, but I get dramatic about it. So like, I'm thinking, okay, it's like Harry Kiri, like every time I'm on that phone and I'm waiting for it. And it's like I'm cutting myself across the stomach and the pain is absolutely horrendous. And I'm stuck into that pain. And I'm never going to be able to get out of that pain until I get into a program or her to somehow accept that I'm right, or her to say somehow that she's happy, or something, and I'm on this and I can't get off it. And this goes on, and this is Japan, and then I come back to Ireland, and I'm 4 years in Ireland, then I go to Australia, and now I'm in Australia. And you know, in along the way, I had a sponsor in SA, and he said to me, I said to him, I said, I said, I think now I'm about time ready for another relationship. And he said, oh, well, no, he was a very devout person of his particular religion. Now, this is there's three things you could do. So you could stay celibate for the rest of your life. You see, you could marry either of the mothers of your children, or you could get another sponsor. And I thought, what part of this is suggested? You know what I mean? Like, wait, what part of this is suggested? So I immediately got on the phone to somebody who had more time than him. I said, man, like I'm here between a rock and a hard place here, you see. And he said, well, Brendan, he said, can you put it off making a decision for another year? Well, at that stage now, I've been 4 years in SA and I'm like sort of, I'm sober and I'm not married, so I'm celibate. And I said, yeah, man, I can do that in my head because it's not about the sex. It's about like sort of, it's about like, it's more about a relationship. Yeah? So I go along with that. But I'm telling my sponsor and I'm saying like, but there's no relationship there. And he said, she's doing her job perfectly. And I thought, man, the guy's really nuts, and he said, she's going to teach you unconditional love. And I thought, that sounds really painful. And that's not really what I'm looking for here. What I'm looking for here is I'm going to give something and I'm going to get something back. But you're saying to me, I have to learn to give something without anything of getting back. I mean, isn't that the way relationships are supposed to work? It's supposed to be like 50-50 or something like this. And somewhere on the way, I heard somebody say, no, he said, love is like 150 to 0. It's like, it's not a trade, And somebody else sort of said, in a relationship, you need both respect and love. In a relationship without respect, there is no love. Because love without respect is not love. It's a trade. I'm trading. Anyway, I'm thinking about these things or whatever. I'm still, and I'm, by this stage now, I'm 14 years sober in AA and I'm doing fairly good, but I'm in Australia and I'm having a bit of, I'm working on I'm on a fellowship thing. I'm in the trustee, not the trustee level. I'm at sort of like the Australian fellowship in this other program. And I'm involved in it and whatever, and I'm doing it, but they're blocking me all the time. And I'm trying to get it to be a region so that we can get it involved in the international thing. But they kind of, they got some kind of, I would call it like frontier recovery sort of stuff going on. And they want to sort of keep it that way. And, and I like, I'm shifter shaker. I want to move things. And so like, I'm running up against a little bit of conflict. And I don't think they're playing by the game. And so I'm sitting in a meeting with somebody. And I'm saying, for fuck's sake. And there's a guy there turned up late. The meeting says, oh, could you watch your language, please? Man, like, just get off my goat. Like, you showed up late. You're doing this or whatever. So a couple of minutes later, the meeting's over. I'm out there and I'm saying, oh, for feck's sake. Now, this is Irish language. Okay, so in Ireland, feck's sake does not mean necessarily any type of, it's not a slur. It's not a curse. It's not anything. It's just like it's part of the language. If you didn't hear it, it's like a comma. It's like a comma. It's like a big comma. You know what I mean? And you use it in various different ways, but it's not intended to offend anybody. It's just, it's like, like get off my case, And anyway, he says something to me again about it, and I went up and I read him up the left and down the right, and I was like, now I don't know if you do with this rage thing. If you've done this rage thing, if you haven't, you've missed out. Rage is like, rage is another level altogether. It's just like another level. It's like, the Michelin Man. Yeah. You like pump him up. Like, that's what it is. You get it like Conan the Barbarian. You're down here and you're a little bit skinny and whatever. By the time you get the rage and it gets up here, like you've inflated, you're kind of really filling the space and nobody else is speaking. You know what I mean? And it just feels kind of good. It feels kind of good. It's like, that's the silence I wanted. That's the silence I wanted. And I'm up here in this thing. And then, of course, you got to come down. And you come back down and the heart is pounding. And I realized, man, this is not good. Yeah, this is not good. So anyway, I'm supposed to fly to Colombia to do a workshop for this group. And now they've decided that I'm really not stable enough to allow to go to Colombia. You know what I mean? Like to run a recovery workshop. So I'm really, really annoyed about this. And then I realized, hang on here. I'm the one who's losing his cool. I mean, these guys may be doing stuff which is inappropriate, but I lose my cool every so often and I explode. And I used to do it really regularly. And I would explode and then I would come down. And now I'm calm and I expect everybody else to be happy out because Brendan's now like in a blissful place of sort of, we've been there, we've had the hit and down, we're all good. It's okay. I got it off my chest. And I realized, my father alienated me when I was about 12. I went in one time on my homework and he was a mathematician and, he's giving me a hard time over this maths problem that I can get right. And I'm thinking, what's your problem? Why don't you just tell me what to do? Yeah. Where's your problem? So I walked out of there at 12 and that was it. I was done with my father, I mean, okay, he's there, but like sort of, we just, we were at war from then on. Yeah. And I would never go to him to ask anything, My son said to me recently, he was thinking about going back to live in Peru. And I said, what would you miss? And he'd say, I'd miss coming to you when I got a problem. And I thought, wow, you'd come to your father when you got a problem? That was not where I was going, yeah? I was going to the pub, I mean, like sort of, But I realized that my father had alienated me, or I had been alienated by an action of his. And it wasn't the only time. He was kind of stern and he had the rage things going on. I thought maybe I'll do that to my kids. So I went to a 14-week anger management course. See now, and I'm thinking like, hey, I'm going to the anger management course. Those other guys who stopped me from going to Colombia, they're probably not doing anything. So I'm getting better, and because I gotta find some way to feel good about it. Yeah? So I'm at this anger management course, and I'm doing this anger management course, and there's all these guys around. They've all been sent by the courts, or they've been told that they're going to be put out of their houses or whatever, sort of this thing, and they're there. And one of them is a guy. He's not really big, but this guy can really do people harm, and he's got all those skills and whatever. Anyway, so I'm in there one day, and I'm sitting at this thing, and the people who are running it, they're there, and they're talking about how we're all going to be good, and it's all going to be great, and it's all going to be sort of this, and I'm going, this is not what I came here for. I came here to get a remedy, and I'm not getting the remedy, and I'm sitting here, and I'm getting angrier and angrier and angrier. And the steam is coming out of my ears, and I'm going black, and my stomach is things, and I'm doubled up like this or this thing, whatever. Everybody's around having their meeting, and I'm just there like I'm sort of curled up like this ball of pain. At the end of the thing, this guy, the really dangerous guy, comes over to me and he says, man, you've got really aggressive body language. And I mentioned it to the mother of my son, and she said, well, I've been telling you that for years. I've been telling you that for years. And I started to realize like there's all these things going on about which, like, I'm not really present, I'm rages and this and that and the other. And I expect it comes back when I get okay, but like, I'm not seeing the debris I've put around. And I'm in this thing where I'm trapped in this situation where I'm looking for something external to make me feel okay. And it's just not happening. So I came back to Ireland. I was back in Ireland. I was at my parents' house. I remember getting down on my knees and praying, and I prayed to God to take away the need for the mother of my son or any woman to give me my sense of self. Bill had talked about that dependency. And if you listen to Tom Brady Jr., Tom Brady talks about that and how at 26 years of sobriety, he was like, he just wanted to die and his wife had left him, whatever. He kind of driven everybody away, because it was this insatiable need for somebody to constantly be telling you that you were right, or constantly making you feel okay. And I had this need that everybody had to be smiling. If they weren't smiling, it must be my fault. I had to do something about it. They should know that if they weren't smiling, I'm going to feel bad. And so like, I didn't realize just how much pressure I was putting on the people around me. to the extent that even people who wanted to be around me were like, it's just so difficult because I'm really sensitive to any kind of criticism, and if you've got an opinion different from mine, that's criticism, you know? And so like it makes it pretty difficult to work with me or to do those sort of things. And I've got all this sort of stuff going on. Anyway, I got to this stage of realizing I had to get some freedom from this. And I read Bill's letter and I listened to speaker tapes and whatever. And I got down on my knees and I prayed for God to take away my need for the mother of my son or any woman to give me my sense of self. And then I walked up by the river to a nicer place by the river where I'm from in Galway. And I got down on my knees again and I prayed again. And as I was coming back, I was stepping over a small little sort of stream. And just as I put my foot down on this piece of marshy ground, I remember it hit me. The St. Francis prayer, which I had been using since I came back into AA, I'd been using it every day, as my meditation, that it wasn't a prayer to be a saint. Kind of it's like, where there's hatred, let me bring love and all those sort of things. Oh, that's so great. But it was actually God grant that I might seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, and to love than to be loved. And I got it. It's a prayer for freedom. Because if my life is about, if the pleasure in my life is what I can give rather than what I get back, then you can't let me down. You can't screw up my day. You can't screw up my day. You can't screw up my life. I have the choice whether or not I want to interact with people. There's people, we've just been gone through, my parents have died, they're going through this thing with the house and whatever. I've got two brothers who are just like I was. They immediately go to war, immediately. And just because it doesn't go up in that sort of thing, like I go straight over the cliff edge, they go straight over and into rage. And it must have been in our family. And I watch them and I see them and I get caught up in this thing. And so I stay away from it because it's my well-being. And I'm in DA as well. And, they keep telling me, Brendan, you've got to take actions, be good to yourself. And for years and years, I was in here and I was doing all the step work and I was making amends and I was making amends and making amends. And somewhere along the way, I was back in Peru and my sponsor was talking to me and he said to me, he said, did you ever try this, rapid eye movement sort of stuff? And I said, no, but I immediately went out and found somebody. And within a month I had shifted more than I'd shifted in years, I think. But what was really interesting was what came up was, that time when I was in school and the teachers were used to hit me. That wasn't right. And I used to feel like I was a coward for years because I didn't like to be hit. And so I would pull my hand away. And so I'm left with this feeling like I'm a coward. And the way my father treated me, it wasn't right. He was big guy. Well, he wasn't big. I mean, by the time I was 16, I was taller than him, but he was like, here he was, he's this maths professor, he's this, I mean, brilliant scholar, he's all these sort of things and whatever, but he's got this rage thing going with me and he's going blue in the face with me. It wasn't right. I didn't have to go back and change them, but it was really important for me to know that and to get this feeling that, at a certain stage in recovery, I've been making all my amends, what I remember, but it's like, I'm not going to be making amends forever. Bill says that he got to this place in bright sunshine. Oh, sunshine. That's where I think I am. I'll finish on this. There was a Rabbi Taiz, Shaiz, yeah, and he does this tape on emotional sobriety, basically, and he's talking about it, and he says the way that you get to self-validation is through God consciousness. And I thought, oh man, do you mean sort of like doing a Thomas Merton on it, like to spend 18 years in sort of a silent monastery or something, only to find out it didn't work, yeah? And he said something that this really changed my life. He said, God consciousness is when I accept myself as I am, you as you are, and the world as it is today. And I thought, I can do that. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you very much, Brendan. We will now take 3 minutes of silence in any form meditation, prayer, or personal reflection you wish, followed by opening up the meeting from there. So see 3 minutes.